Did you know that Muslims around the world protected hundreds of thousands of Jews from being killed by the Nazis? You see, in 1918, Germany lost World War I to the Allied powers and was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty stipulated that Germany would have to pay damages to the Allies, give up their overseas colonies, and were forbidden from rebuilding a national military. But when this was implemented, Germany was regularly unable to make enough money to pay back the reparations, often defaulting. As punishment, France and Belgium occupied the Ruhr Valley, which was where many of the German factories and companies were, making it now even more difficult to pay back the reparations and ultimately dragging the German economy into hyperinflation. To give you an idea of what this was like, at the beginning of 1923, one loaf of bread was worth 160 German marks. By the end of the next year, it was 200 billion. People were burning money to heat their homes because it was cheaper than wood. And this economic suffering and the feeling of national shame and humiliation made the more extreme political parties very popular. And in 1933, with the promise of restoring glory to the German people and dealing with the quote-unquote vermin of the country, the Nazi party under Adolf Hitler rose to power. He quickly consolidated his control of the country, and within 5 years, he had nearly total control over the government and the military. And this is where the killings began. World War II began in 1939 when Hitler invaded Poland to the east in order to gain back territory lost in World War I and to subjugate his neighbors and ultimately use the resources of that country and the other countries around it to try to make Germany a self-sustaining country, one that wouldn't have to rely on trade with other countries to prosper. And it was during the war when he first approved Action T4, in which doctors were ordered to kill up to 300,000 patients in psychiatric hospitals who were mentally ill or physically disabled. He would continue such campaigns against gypsies, blacks, Slavs, Jehovah's Witnesses, and of course, Jews. Initially, the plan for the Jews was to send them off to Madagascar, but as he invaded the countries to the east where most of the Jews lived, the plan was scrapped, and another plan was implemented called the Final Solution. He ordered Jews to be rounded up wherever they could be found and brought them to concentration camps where they were either killed on arrival or worked and starved to death. And this is where the Muslims took a stand. In Nazi-occupied France, the main masjid in Paris was used to hide hundreds of Jews and protect them from the Nazis. The Algerian imam at the time worked in secret to arrange forged documents and passports to allow Jews to seek shelter in other countries, and even worked with Muslim groups to physically smuggle the Jews out of France. Eventually, the Nazi secret police found out and arrested him, but they let him go, fearing that the Muslims would take to the street and riot. In a similar story, the Turkish ambassador in France provided citizenship papers and passports to thousands of Jews, no matter how little connection they actually had to Turkey, saving the lives of almost 20,000 Jews. And he was only one of a string of Turkish officials posted all over Europe who worked hard to save as many people as they could. In another story, in Morocco, the country was under French occupation at the time, and because the Nazis had occupied France, the French government was forced to implement Nazi policies in their own colonies. But the Moroccan king stood up for the Jews of the country, threatening the Germans and the French, and out of 250,000 Jews who lived there, not a single one was touched by the Nazis or their French collaborators. And finally, we come to Albania, the only Muslim-majority country in Europe at that time. The people there had a code of honor called Besa, an unbreakable promise to protect and shelter the refugees of war. And even though the government was under Nazi occupation at the time, the Jewish population there actually tripled. It was the only European country which had more Jewish people at the end of World War II than before. And all of this is no different from when the Jewish people used to live with us when the Muslims ruled Spain and Portugal. And when the Europeans reconquered the peninsula, the Jews fled to other Muslim lands in Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, and Turkey to escape from the Europeans who were forcing them to convert to Christianity. We sometimes forget that the Muslims have always been the protectors of the Jewish people, even when Europe was trying to purge them, a fact that Europeans often forget. Like and follow for more Muslim facts.